what happened was because now they had to build and congregate for different reasons other than what they did before, because this was a nice little place beside the river, because it was this, because it was now because you had to be near the economic center that had built this mill or whatever. And how are you going to build where, so they started to build in stone, and they started to build squares. They started to build homes, and they basically built thatched houses. But the top and most of it was still thatched, and if you look at pictures, renditions, what we know about, the older they get, the more there was attached, and the rounder it was more boat-shaped. So it only gradually became square, and some of the older ones go round.
That's kind of confused. Why did it switch to square to round?
Pardon?
Round to square. What caused that? Or that? Even if they're living closer together or towns, what makes it go round to square?
European, British, foreign influences starting to creep in. Pardon? Yes. Just if you brought in an English stonemason and you tell them to build a round thing, he'd say, "What the hell are you talking about?"
They weren't still making it out of wattle, even in what was it called?
Well, they.
Wattle and dog, but
Yeah,
that was more Crannóg. That's very rudimentary.
Yeah, no. Mostly they use lime and sometimes seashells and stuff. That's some incredible mortar. They really were wonderful at that stuff. They had amazing mortars. But
probably the upper classes could afford the more.
Yeah, it came in gradually because it was a European thing. It was a sophisticated thing. It would not have been very traditional to the Irish, but gradually they learned it. But certainly they started to square up gradually. But also a word came into the Irish language, which is very descriptive. Those little villages became known as clachans. Clachans. Now, the
How's that spelled?
Clochan. Cloc with a dot on it, a father n. Clachan. The Irish language looks a lot more complicated when spelt in Roman letters. Spelt in its older letters, it's much shorter. So C without a dot is hard. Cloch, C. It's not. And CLOC with a dot on it, soft C, cloch. CLOC, cloch. And anything that's on or in is kind of like it's an endearing. It's like it's not just a diminutive. It's a sort of an endearing thing. So the on is just simply an endearing thing, a clachan. But it's sort of more than just on. It's a sort of a thing, It's the thing made of cloth, stones, and but also it's in a way it's kind of like pejorative too. It's like it's that stone thing up there. They're very subtle in that it wasn't quite what they wanted. They weren't quite happy about it either. So early Irish, modern, if you like, modern being sort of probably we're talking 12th, 13th century here, would be clachans, and they gradually evolved into the towns, the market towns that we have today, which are just modern clachans, with English became more anglified. The roofs started to get slated with Bangor slates from Bangor in Wales, and so on. But even old pictures of the last century, half or more of the roofs in a traditional Irish market town, even a fairly large town like Tuam or Mullingar or Longford and stuff, would have quite a lot of thatched houses, thatched roofs, because there was still an abundance of corn. They were growing a lot of. Now remember, corn is not maize. It's not American corn. Corn is it's like football. You guys took the word football and you call it American. Same thing with corn. Corn is a generic name for cereals in most everywhere else in the world, especially in Europe. So when you say corn, you don't mean maize. In other words, Indian corn. You don't mean American corn. You mean all the various cereal crops, particularly oats. They had a tremendous number of variety of oats, barley and wheat and so on. So when you say corn, that's what we're talking about here. But now, a byproduct of growing the corn was was an abundance of straw, an abundance of the stalks, which they used for. That was relatively inexpensive, whereas slates were expensive. And there was a massive program of slating the house in the latter half of the 19th century. The famine Irish that came over did well and sent home their dollars back to Ireland and right into the 20th century. And there's an old expression in Ireland is, she sent home the slates. So Bridget, so they would proudly point to the house. It had a slated house. Almost certainly meant that they had a daughter or two beyond in America. And she had sent the slates. She had sent the slates. In other words, she sent the money to go buy the slates. And that would have been a proud claim for the slated house. There was so then in the 20th century there probably was only a very small number of slated houses in Ireland, even in the towns, in the latter half, up until the latter half of the 19th century. Most of the old traditional towns, especially small villages, would have been thatched houses. Now, I want to talk about thatched houses very, very briefly because they filled a period between the dunes, the raths, right down to modern times. I mean, really, right down into the 50s. The thatched house. Now, the thatched house was a very inexpensive from the point of view of hard cash. It was expensive in man hours, but they didn't count. They didn't put a lot of value on their and it was all done by a mehel. In other words, it was done by the local men who came together and did it. And they, as they would say in Ireland, they threw up a house in a few days. You know, typical Irish expression, instead of throwing it down, they threw it up. So they would throw up a house, I mean literally in a few days. And they would do, you know, as many as would be necessary. So the stories that you hear as a kid is Mike met Margaret at the dance and so, they got married and the village threw up a house for them over behind the hill, you know, and such and such a time, you know. So the trigger or the incidence of throwing up a thatched house was a fine wedding. And also a lot of them didn't actually go home from the wedding, they stayed to build the house.
Wow.
You heard that story many times over.
There you go.
Many times over. And they would time the wedding and time everything to when that would be, when the men would have time to do that. And there might be 2 or 3 of them in a row that they would time, where they'd go. And they'd party, you know, the whole time, because there'd be lashings of beer and drink or whatever, so and so on. So they'd be and they'd be entitled to it because it'd be hard work.
Is that where our barn racings?
Huh? I'm sure it is. Oh, I have no doubt that it was typical all across of Europe. I have no doubt that, and I'm sure Americans practiced it here, of course.
The original habitat for humanity.
An original habitat for humanity.
Yeah.
That's why I love the word habitat. So the stories that I heard growing up as a kid had those as the background and intermingled among that all the they didn't even think about it. That, oh yeah, I remember when we built that house, yeah, you know, so and so, John Forick Willie married Maura Fat Sham or whatever, you know. and there's the daughter beyond there now, and they have the slates on it now from the girl in America, you know, that sort of thing. Yeah,
I love it.
yeah. So the way, and it was all, of course, the land. When they carved up the little piece of land, and gave that little few meadows beyond, a few meadows beyond, and that a bit of bog up behind the hill, and that river piece down below. Would be what somebody had got. And everybody know exactly what they meant. What piece of maybe three different pieces of land that they would have. And remember, the donkey was the only thing. The little roads, they were very just stones, but they didn't need to be leveled and paved because very, very few people had a cart. The only one that probably would have a cart would be the ganger man, the foreman for the county council.